Hi there, and welcome to the next steps on your journey to getting clear. In this video, we'll look at the first way to distribute your education-based marketing, the live workshop or presentation script. You'll want to adhere to this template closely each and every time you have an opportunity to share your content live with a group. But remember, we can also repurpose this later. But for now, let's get to the template. So you can use this template in many different situations. For example, when you lead self-hosted introductory workshops, you can use it when you are invited to speaking engagements. You can use it if you decide to give a talk at a local bookstore or community center or school. Now, whatever way you decide to use it, there are some subtleties that make this live workshop template very effective. Let's dive into it step by step. There's an overarching principle that's guiding the delivery of this script. Each segment of the script utilizes what's called next action selling. Next action selling refers to constructing your live presentation so that each part encourages your audience to open up to you, to trust you, listen to you, as well as get increasingly excited to believe you and buy from you. In most circumstances, you're going to be in front of a cold audience when you offer your front-end marketing content. An audience who doesn't know you or has very limited prior knowledge or relationship with you. Therefore, you must design your presentation to quickly and effectively earn their trust. You don't want to be 50 minutes into your presentation before people are open to you and trusting you and fully listening to you. So this template will show you and help you how to ethically connect with and influence your group right from the moment you start. Each segment of the template is selling the audience on listening just a little bit longer and just a little bit longer. And that's the next action selling piece. You can find a live workshop script template to download on this page and follow along as we go through the template. Now, before we get into the actual template, it's important to know that before you take any stage, whether it's live in person or even on a webinar, you'll want to arrange to be introduced by someone. A proper introduction allows you to take the stage with some of your credibility and expertise already established. When it's done well, an introduction gives you a little boost in the hearts and minds of your audience, which then goes a long way in speeding up the process of them opening to you. Okay, now let's get into the template. After you're introduced, the first thing that you'll want to do each and every time you take the stage is what's called the stop and scan. You see, when most speakers take the stage, they immediately start talking. They say some mundane things about themselves or mumble something that's meant to be quirky under their breath, or talk to someone in the audience as they settle in, ignoring the rest of the audience. Or my worst pet peeve is the way they handle the mic if there's one. They like, is this thing on? This is all just terrible. It doesn't put your audience at ease. My years as a performing magician and mentalist has helped me hone my skills in giving public talks and presentations. When I take the stage, I purposely slow down. I've already been doing some deep, intentional, heart-focused breathing before I got on stage, even though I'm not necessarily nervous. But it's a way that brings me into being more centered and focused. And then I purposely stop and scan. This stopping and scanning and not saying a word pulls my audience in. It's not what they're used to with speakers, so they lean forward, curious to see what happens next. This is the first step in doing something to silently sell them into listening just a little bit longer. What happens is that you walk to the center of the stage, take a slow, deep, heart-focused breath, and take in the room. In other words, take your time to scan through the faces of your audience. You can linger and make eye contact, smile, and silently connect with as many people as you can. This stop and scan can last anywhere from 5 or 10 seconds up to a full minute. The strategy behind the stop and scan and why it works so well is that firstly, it's a great thing to help you get centered. You see, there's a significant shift in energy from being off stage to being on stage. Giving yourself a few moments to stop, breathe, to look, allows you to arrive and settle into this new energy. It gives you time to get grounded and settled into your body. Additionally, most audiences are used to speakers immediately talking when they take the stage. So when you don't do this, you're going to build intrigue and interest. Even if they find this a bit strange, they're going to lean forward to see what happens next. You've got their attention. After your stop and scan, you'll move into what's called the hook. The hook is designed to attract interest, grab attention, and further compels people to listen. Think of this as your opening magic trick. You want it to be short but powerful and setting the stage for what will happen next, which is always a mystery. In other words, it'll get them to listen just a little bit longer. Your hook must grab the mental and emotional attention of your potential client, allowing them to focus and also arrive. It takes them from whatever they were doing before they came to you to being totally with you, 100% present. There are a few important guidelines to consider when selecting your hook. First, it must enroll everybody's interest. Don't leave anyone out. Second, it must be relevant. Non-relevant hooks can totally confuse people. I've seen some speakers show a funny video at the beginning of their presentation, which gets a laugh, but then they don't circle back to it again. They use it as an icebreaker and then don't refer back to it in the main part of their presentation. So yes, it gets a laugh, but you'll leave your audience feeling that something's missing and they won't quite know what it is. Some speakers use stories as their hook. This can work as long as you're a masterful or even fairly good storyteller, as telling stories can sometimes come off as being too scripted and contrived. A good story must be scripted to some degree, but more importantly, it needs to come from the heart. I found this out the hard way. I remember giving a talk to an organization called Commensa a number of years back. Commensa is a recognized non-statutory professional body for coaching and mentoring in South Africa. I remember starting off with the good old "What is HeartMath" leading at the time. This was before I knew any better. My hook, I thought, was these coaches were in the room because they wanted to find out about HeartMath, and so I delivered. I told them what HeartMath was, what we did, spoke about the science, and slowly noticed that the vibe in the room was kind of flat. I could see on their faces that I wasn't getting through to them, and so I started telling my personal story. The vibe in the room started to change. They leaned in, they seemed to hang on every word, and even though I felt uncomfortable telling that story, I knew that it was what they were wanting to hear. You see, more than anything, they wanted to connect with me. And up until that point, I was speaking at them. I was broadcasting. I was speaking to them. I wasn't inviting them in. At the next talk I gave, I consciously decided to begin with my story, and it worked out much better. Over the years, I've now learned when to slow down, make eye contact and linger, when to speed up, and how to use my body to reinforce the message I want to convey. That story, by the way, was then repurposed as the intro to my ebook, Conversations with Coaches. Although I had to change the script to suit storytelling as writing, some of the sad parts and some of the jokes are still there. I've had people write to me saying how they connect with that story in the ebook and that it's even moved them to tears. So that's one hook I have and can use when the occasion calls for it. Another is actually a big favorite of mine, and that's asking the audience a question. This hook comes in different types of questions, and here's two to give you an example. The first I've mentioned before, and I use this when the word heart is in the title of my talk. For example, parenting with heart, or activating the intuitive heart. A quick side note before I carry on. I realize that these are not the titles that you've been working on. For example, 3 big mistakes even good parents make that make parenting stressful. But remember, I would be speaking to a potentially wider audience with the view of actually introducing them to HeartMath, whereas you are speaking to a specific audience with the view to solving a specific problem. Okay, so let's get back to the question. The question that I like to ask is, what do you think of when you hear the word heart? My lead into that question normally goes something like this. As I begin, I say, I'm always intrigued at the beginning of a talk, such as this, about what brings you here today. What was it that made you decide to come here and spend an hour of your time with me? Was it that you've heard about HeartMath before? Or was it perhaps something in the title? Or maybe it was a feeling that you had. Whatever it was, I'd like to know from you, what do you think of when you hear the word heart? So in just a couple of seconds, I've connected with my audience by sharing that I'm curious about them, and I have them engage through an opening question. This has worked very well for me over the years as well. And I even use a similar approach for potential one-on-one clients, asking them to qualify why they're attracted to coaching and being coached by me, versus me trying to prove to them why coaching is a worthwhile solution to their problem and I'm the coach for them. Rather ask them why they are interested. The second hook I like to use from time to time, depending on what I'm wanting to achieve from the talk, is this image from HeartMath. I show this photo and ask the audience, what do you think this young girl is feeling? Usually I get all the positive responses that this photo generates: love, joy, appreciation, connection, and so on, which I acknowledge and confirm. And then I tell the backstory of her living in a refugee camp, wet in her bed at night, living day to day, not knowing what the future holds, being scared and afraid and alone, and being taught HeartMath emotional self-regulation skills that have helped her connect with her own heart to manage her anxieties. This hook, as the ones before it, allows me to go in any one of several directions as needed by the outcome I'm wanting from my talk. Another hook that you could use very effectively are any relevant and important statistics you have. The more earth-shattering, the better. For example, enter the room after your introduction, walk to center stage, stop and scan, connect with your audience, turn to the flip chart, and write down your ground-shaking statistic. For example, write down 3%, and then turn to your audience and you can say, only 3% of the population are actively looking for a solution to their problem and are ready to take action on it. And if your marketing isn't effective education-based marketing, you are in competition with everyone else to get the attention of that 3%. Here's another example. How about combining a statistic with a did you know? For example, you could write on the flip chart 150 million women and then say, did you know that there's well over 150 million women in Canada and the US alone? Go back to the flip chart and write $5 trillion. Turn back to your audience and say, these 150 million women have close to $5 trillion worth of buying power. Then you go back to the flip chart once more and write the statistic 80%. Turn around back to the audience and you say, and did you know that 80% of consumer decisions are being made by women right now? What does this mean for you as a business owner? Well, unless you have a sales and marketing strategy specifically targeted to women, you're going to be struggling unnecessarily. So can you see how these kinds of hooks engage and get you interested, making you want to listen for longer? Another way to do a hook is to use jokes, comics, cartoons, or humor, or even drama, but again, it needs to be relevant to the content of your talk. Another clever way to use a hook is something called enrolling questions. An enrolling question is designed to get an emphatic yes from most, if not all, of your audience. Tony Robbins uses enrolling questions very effectively at the start of these presentations. For example, a simple enrolling question might be, how many of you are ready to help a whole lot more people with your business? And how many of you are ready to make a whole lot more money while you do this? Right? So both of those questions get that emphatic yes. Here are some guidelines for enrolling questions. Make sure you choose questions that get everyone to say yes. If you're not sure that you're going to get 100% enrollment, don't use that question. Just don't risk it. Number 2, again, make sure that your enrolling questions are relevant and speak to the reason why your participants came to your workshop or talk. 3, keep your enrolling questions simple. Don't get too complicated with your enrolling questions. Now, here's a very important subtlety to any invitation to engage with you. Remember to always say thank you when your audience responds. Okay, so now it's your turn. In a moment, you're going to pause the video and write your hook. Specifically, I'd like you to write 1 or 2 enrolling questions. Pause the video now and write your hook. The next part of the live workshop or talk script is your welcome. This part is simple. This is where you're just going to introduce yourself to the audience. You'll say your name and use the full title of your workshop or talk. For example, my name is Alan Stradham and welcome to the 3 massive mistakes workshop leaders make that keep their event rooms empty. And that's it. That's it for the welcome. Notice that you've probably been on stage for several minutes already before you've mentioned your name. Before this, it's been all about the audience, and now you're finally going to introduce yourself. Again, this keeps them wanting to listen just a little bit more. So pause the video now and write down your welcome. The next section is acknowledging and thanking section. And here you'll simply pause to offer sincere thank you or acknowledgement to your audience. Here's 2 examples of thanking and acknowledging. Number 1, I thank and acknowledge you for being here today. You know, there's a saying that goes like this, 80% of success is just showing up. So thank you for showing up. And now, since I can't reach all of you, can you do me a favor? Please put your arms up like this and pat both of your neighbors on the back and say, congratulations for showing up. A second way is saying something like, you know, one of my favorite sayings goes like this, massive action trumps planning every single time. You took massive action to get here today, and it's about to pay off. Please do me a favor right now. I can't reach all of you. So can you please put your arms up like this and pat both of your neighbors on the back and say, congratulations for taking massive action to get here. Notice that in these examples, your audience is already feeling successful just for showing up. This small action goes a long way to quickly build rapport and establish trust. You can use either one of these ways or make up your own to acknowledge and thank your audience. So pause the video now and write your acknowledge and thank you. The next section is for thanking and edifying the host. This section is only used if you are speaking in someone else's room or by invitation from someone else. Not only is it polite and good manners, but in doing so, you also strategically leverage the relationship the audience already has with the host. When you acknowledge the relationship the audience has with the host, they will now feel that they have a relationship with you. You've established a vicarious connection. This is very powerful in having your audience relax and trust you early. And here's a way you can do that. For example, I'd like to take a minute to thank our host. Thank you, Gavin. I'm so honored that you trust me with your group, and I promise to take great care of them and to give them as much value as possible in the time we have together. That's it. So pause the video right now and write your thank you and edify host section of the script. The next part of the script is your turning point story. This is a short, strategic personal life story shared by you, designed to quickly demonstrate your specific expertise while expressing your general humanity. Expertise refers to your ability to demonstrate that you're a competent professional or an expert in your field, while humanity refers to your ability to demonstrate that you are a human being just like the members of your specific audience, facing the same problems, pains, and dilemmas. Demonstrating equal amounts of expertise and humanity helps them connect more with you, trust you, and potentially want to continue the journey with you in some way. Many workshop leaders and presenters do a good job of doing one or the other, but very seldom can they balance both, and most don't use a story to do so. Or for those who do use stories to connect, they can also be too long. Too much humanity and you'll start wanting them to get to the point already. On the other hand, too much expertise and you'll end up feeling you'll never be able to achieve what they have. Showing too much expertise can make a goal unreachable. Your audience needs to think and feel that they can do what you did. That's the point of the Turning Point story. Now, I spoke about how I use my personal story earlier on in this video, and you've already written some of your personal story down in the first workbook I sent you. So here's the gist of creating that story. First, it's a good idea to ask permission to tell your Turning Point story to your audience. Remember that it's still very early on in your time on stage, and your audience isn't there to listen to you talk about what you do and tell stories about yourself. They're there to learn something. So here's an example of that. Since we're going to be spending a little time together today, would it be okay to tell you just a little bit about myself so that you have some context for who I am and why you should even listen to me? To go ahead, you'll say thank you and you'll begin your story. Remember that your Turning Point story will journey them through a succinct, relevant, strategically crafted story that establishes your expertise and humanity. It could start out with the highlights of the great things that you're currently experiencing in your life in the areas that they are interested in. If you're a business coach, describe how great your business is doing. Talk openly about the income you're making. Share about the abundance of life and health that you have. After that, you'll take them into the low dip of the story, and this is where you will detail a time in your life where things were not so great. You'll describe how you struggled, and be sure to mention things that they may currently be experiencing. The goal is to have them feel like you really understand their pain and have personal experience with it. And then you'll detail the turning point where you took action or gained insight or inspiration or education that changed everything for you and got you out of the dip. But here's a tip. Don't make your turning point an education or lesson-based story. This is where the story can oftentimes feel contrived again. And if you try to teach or convey a lesson at this point, you're going to lose your audience. They will feel manipulated. Just tell your story and trust that they will get the point of your story. The lesson must remain implicit and subtle. After the turning point of the story, you'll bring them back into the high or back into the present, sharing with them all the wonderful things that have happened since the turning point. And then you'll transition out of the story by saying something like, well, that's enough about me, let's get back to you. This line will put the attention back on your audience and get them excited again about what's coming next. Pause the video and write your turning point story as best you can. The next part of your script is called the What's in it for me section. This is where you'll state 3 to 5 benefits that your audience will receive from your time together, which means you'll describe what your audience will discover by the end of your time on stage. Here are some guidelines for writing What's in it for me effectively. Tip number 1. You can simply rephrase your data points in a mysterious way. Don't give the data point away though, but rather offer a compelling teaser. For example, by the end of our time together, you'll discover the one word you must know to be successful in business. Or, By the end of our time together, you'll discover the number one biggest reason most coaches fail in their first few years. Or, by the end of our time together, you'll discover 3 ways to stop your kids from destroying your relationship. You get the point. These are all compelling and interesting ways to hook people's attention and get them excited about the content that's coming up next. Tip number 2 for the what's in it for me part, you can refer back to the title template you completed earlier in this program and use any of the other titles that you didn't choose for your main title. And tip number 3, download the what's in it for me template on this page and simply fill in the blanks. Okay, pause the video now and create your what's in it for me section. Okay, back, all done, good? Well, we're finally here. We're finally at the point where you'll actually teach your data points. A reminder that all the work you've done up to this point in your script is designed to persuade your audience to open up more, trust you more, and agree to listen just a little bit longer to you. Most people underestimate the power of this setup. However, without them, the chances of taking a first-time client to being a lifetime client diminishes significantly. So let's review these beginning sections quickly. The stop and scan gets your audience to lean in and get interested as they wonder why you're just standing up there and not talking. The hook gets them excited and intrigued about the content that's coming up. The welcome, acknowledge, and thank you has them feel great, has them feel seen and appreciated just for showing up at your event, and has them open up to you further. The turning point story has the audience relax and feel both your humanity and your expertise. They'll trust that you can take them where they want to go, while they feel that you're just like them and you really understand their challenges. Your turning point story is a powerful way to connect with your audience, have them believe you and want to continue working with you. The what's in it for me section is another way to grab interest. It keeps your audience excited about what they're about to learn and gets them ready to take awesome notes. And once you've done a great job on these opening sections, you're ready to plug in your education-based content. You will reveal each of your data points sequentially, counting them down from 3 to 1. Make sure you do a good job of teaching what each data point is, why it's so important, and how each data point can be implemented immediately. You'll check your positioning to make sure that it's optimal for the next step, positioning the purchase. But before you do that, now that you've got the first context, the first way, as it were, of how you are sharing or distributing your marketing, for example, in this live workshop or presentation situation, you might choose to modify what you wrote previously. You might choose to make some sections longer or some sections more succinct. A speaking engagement can last anywhere from 40 minutes to 90 minutes, and a workshop anywhere from 2.5 to 3 hours. So keep that in mind as you create your script. Another form of distribution, as you'll soon see, is self-hosted introductory events, and these can last up to 2 hours or so. So keep these timelines in mind as you refine your script and make your education-based marketing even better. Factor in time to go through these beginning sections and factor in time at the end to go through your offer. Timing is always one of my biggest challenges. When I design a talk or presentation or even a workshop, I lay out each data point sequentially as slides in a slide deck with all the information I want to convey, and then I look at the number of slides I have at the end. I do a quick calculation to see how much time would be needed for each individual slide, and then compare it to the time I have for the entire presentation. I then start cutting back and trimming as needed. If I use slides, I will also try and find images that convey more than just the words I would use to describe that data point, which also helps cutting back with unnecessary scripting. I took this exact approach for the CPD program I delivered. I knew that I wanted to provide a word-for-word script for you to consume. I was very mindful of the time that we had, and yet I still ran out of time. I didn't factor in possible questions and answers along the way. So with all of that in mind, Pause the video now and write your data point section. The final section of your script is your offer. And this is where you give your audience a formal opportunity to invest in the strategic offering that your data points have positioned. Even though most people think your offer starts at the end of your time on stage, you now know better. Your offer really begins the moment you take the stage, right from the start, right from the stop and scan. You've been subtly influencing your audience into opening up to you and, more importantly, taking action to working with you. When you do this correctly, people will already want what you have to offer after they've consumed your 3 data points. This is what happens when you position properly in their hearts and minds with your 3 data points. You want to make sure, though, that you talk about the next step people can take with you. The next step has to be abundantly clear. You want to give them an opportunity to invest in that next step, right there and then. But at this stage, don't worry too much about writing that offer that's coming. So this whole process of writing your live workshop script is lengthy and it will change as you tweak it over time. But here you already have a solid grounding to build your marketing on. Next, we will continue to repurpose this. Okay, see you in the next video. Take care and stay coherent.